Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome back to Time to Laugh, to my Monday morning reading nook. I'm super excited to dive back in. And I know last week I said that I might have time to stream another time, but my week got crazy pretty quickly, and so I just didn't have a chance. So eventually, hopefully, I'll be able to stream more than once a week. But as of right now, with my current schedule, this is what we have, and we're just gonna go with it. And it's been so fun, so it's worth it, even just doing it the one time. I've been trying to, oh my gosh, for what feels like the last couple weeks, but even this morning, I've been trying to figure out how to put markers on my streams so that it's easier for me to go back and clip things, and I just have not been able to figure it out because I use Streamlabs for my streaming, and I tried to like set up all the hotkeys and everything, and it just for some reason is not, I can't figure out how to actually make it have the markers on when I go to edit it. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to try and figure out how to do it today so that I can actually edit it later. I don't really know, but we'll figure it out eventually. Hopefully. But anyways, it doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just read my book and we'll figure it out when we figure it out. But um so I hope you guys had a great weekend and a great week last week. I just came off a an incredible Sunday. We had our men were at our Emerge conference for our church. And so a lot of them were gone for multiple days because the conference started Thursday night and then got done Wednesday like afternoon. So then they got back Saturday. Did I just say Wednesday? Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to. Let's see. It started Thursday night and ended Saturday afternoon. And so most of the guys got back Saturday night and then church yesterday. And it was just, you could tell the difference in the room on Sunday because of just how much the men just grew and had breakthrough and all the different things. So, just coming off an incredible Sunday. So I'm excited to dive back in to the baby catcher gate. So for anybody that is new, sorry, I'm moving things around on my screen. For anybody that's new, I am in the process of reading The Baby Catcher Gate by Wendy Jo Cerna. Wendy Jo is a woman that goes to my church, and she's an author. She's written multiple books, and she gave me permission to read her book out loud on my stream. So I am hoping that this has been entertaining for you guys because I wanted it to be me reading it out loud so you can follow along or just have this be kind of like an audiobook experience, but basically more entertaining because I'm talking to you about it, I'm giving my reactions, I'm showing all the emotion, so it's not just me reading it straight out. So that's been my goal with this, and honestly, it's been so much fun, and I've been loving this book. Absolutely loving it. It's been so incredible to read because I haven't read as many like Christian centered, faith centered books, at least on this stream. And so it's been really fun to read something that is focused on God and focused on faith. And she's such a good writer. It's been incredible, but it's brought a lot of good discussions out as well. So it's just been really fun. I hope you guys have enjoying it. And yeah, I'm at exactly the halfway point, at least from what my Kindle tells me. I'm at 50% of the book. For those that don't know, The Baby Catcher Gate, it's the first in a series. And the. I'm trying to think of like. I need to have a better synopsis basically of what the book is about so it doesn't take me 10 minutes to explain what's happening. But basically, the main character, Pearl, she is from a family of what they call baby catchers, which are basically midwives. She has wanted nothing to do with it because she comes from the family of baby catchers. She is an incredible artist. She basically has an encounter when she's helping her mom with one of the births. She ends up being guided up to heaven to take one of the babies that was stillborn up to heaven. She comes back down, and now she's processing everything that she saw. And while she was there, the angel that was guiding her told her, "You are a baby catcher." And so now she's kind of trying to reconcile that process through what she saw. She just recently, my last stream, I was reading the chapters where she actually ended up helping bring the mother of that stillborn baby out of her like postpartum depression, by telling her the story of her encounter and seeing her baby and taking her baby to heaven. And and she drew a picture of the baby as she saw him when she was taking him to heaven. And so, yeah. She's only 12 years old. And yeah, I think that's all I'll say for now. If you have more questions, let me know. But I'm just gonna, and as always, you can always go back and watch my past streams to kind of get the whole thing, or rewatch and just, read along with me in the book. But anyways, I feel like my intros are sometimes kind of awkward because I don't really know how to transition well. But anyways, I'm gonna start reading now. Here, let me go to my reading page so that you guys have a visual of what the book looks like. This is my first couple of streams. I had the different cover because it was when the book first came out, but she updated the cover to this because it's now part of a series. And so you can find, I'll put the in the information part of the stream, I'll put her website, but it's just www.wendyjocerna.com, and you can find all the information about her, about all of her books. She also has a podcast that I just started listening to an episode the other day, and it's pretty cool. She basically she interviews authors and talks to them about their process of writing and how they went about it, what brought them to being an author, all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good listen to if you want to listen to that. I'm pretty sure it's on all listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then it's on her website as well, so you can listen to it at any of those places, excuse me. So yeah, that's that, and again, read with permission from the author. This is Baby Catcher Gate by Wendy Jo Cerna, and I am going to dive back in. And I'm on chapter 15, page 161 in my Kindle. I'm at 50% way through the book. So chapter 15, Be Gentle. I drifted through my classes the next day, half aware of my surroundings and half lost in a rippling sea of green grass. More than one teacher attempted to pull me back into reality with questions like, "Are you with us today, Pearl?" Or "Earth to Pearl, any chance you might join the rest of us?" I tried to blend into the conversation at the lunch table, but I finally abandoned my efforts and simply let the chatter flitter around me. My friends didn't seem to notice. I guess they had grown accustomed to my occasional remoteness. After school, I grabbed my things from my locker and beelined for the bike rack. I was relieved that I had ridden my bike to school, despite the dropping temperature. I didn't want to walk home with Mel and Elle and be subjected to closer scrutiny. I wanted to get home and sketch Timothy and Siobhan. In my haste, I bumped right into Miss Wells. Oh, so this was the last chapter that I read. She was at a art show of a guy, and he had a bunch of photographs. And a couple of the photographs were of basically like somebody holding their baby, but it was only part of the baby. So it was like a baby's hand or baby's feet. And she saw with her spiritual eyes the whole baby, and actually had an angel tell her or the Holy Spirit tell her what the baby's name was. And so that's what she's saying, Timothy and Siobhan. So now she's wanting to go home and use her artistic ability to now sketch the babies. So in my haste, I bumped right into Miss Wells. "Oh, Pearl, I'm glad I ran into you," she said with a small laugh. She enjoyed puns. "I've been meaning to talk to you." "I'm sorry, Miss Wells. I guess I wasn't paying attention." And that is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, she said. I've noticed you've had a great deal of difficulty paying attention in class lately. Today, you seem to be adrift on some far-off planet for the entire period. It's not like you. Is everything okay? I hesitated. She waited. I'm okay, I said, a little tired, I guess. Didn't sleep too well. Does it have to do with what happened at the art appreciation event last night? Perhaps some of the photographs stirred up your imagination? Truth be told, she leaned in closer, a few of Mr. Stewart's photographs shook me up a bit too. The images he captured were so lifelike. They seemed to jump from the frames. If she only knew. Well, let's hope the solution is simply a good night's rest, she continued. But you will let me know if there's anything I can do, won't you? Yes, ma'am, I will. And I promise to try harder to not be so spaced out in class. I know you will, she said, laying a hand on my shoulder. But please be aware that I have a good listening ear if you need one, even for things beyond the orbit of my classroom. I smiled, despite my longing to escape her field of gravity. Thanks, Miss Wells. I resisted the temptation to add, didn't mean to be so out to launch. It would only have fueled her trajectory. She had a reputation for being able to outpun most anyone, and I didn't have time for that. That's funny. Let's see. Miss Wells retreated into her classroom. I bounded down the stairs and out the front doors. I was on my bike in a jiffy, zigzagging past groups of students who loitered on the sidewalk. Before I bounced off the curb and onto the street, I was already sketching babies in my mind. The entire way home I pedaled and pondered my project, eager to begin. I flew up the driveway and leaned my bike against the house. I was so focused on my plans that I didn't see the other bicycle propped against the front porch until I was nearly upon it. It was a boy's bike, a 10-speed with curled handlebars, definitely not Mel's or L's. Hello, Pearl, came a voice from the top step. I dropped my backpack and shrieked. Ben laughed, then I stomped my foot. That was not nice, Ben Bradley. You scared me half to death. My rebuke, however, only seemed to fuel his laughter. Oh my gosh, he gasped. You should have seen your face. That is the funniest thing I've seen in a long time. I thought you were going to take off running for the hills. He held his stomach and doubled over. I was not amused. When he took a moment to glance at my face, he evidently became aware of this fact, because he attempted to subdue his laughter. He wiped tears from his eyes and offered a half-hearted apology. Sorry for, catching you off guard. You must not get much company. He took a deep breath, blew it out, and brought his outburst to a finale at last. I snatched my backpack from the ground, but remained at the foot of the steps. I wanted to respond with a witty remark, but my mind was fixated on one thought. Ben Bradley was sitting on my front porch. I must have remained frozen for a few seconds too long, since Ben stood up and came down the steps. Hey, listen, Pearl, I'm really sorry I scared you. I didn't mean to. Are you okay? He appeared to be genuinely repentant. Finally, my brain and my mouth decided to cooperate. Oh, no big deal, I said, trying to shake off my irritation. I just wasn't expecting to find you sitting on my porch. Yeah, sorry about that too, he added. I tried to catch you at school today, but never did see you. Were you there? Yes, of course I was there. Hey, how did you find out where I live anyway? Geez, the town's not that big. I can go if you want, he said as he picked up his backpack and moved toward his bike. No, don't go, I said, grabbing his arm. Something like electricity shot through my hand. I gulped. He stared at my hand on his arm. Let's, start over, I said, slipping my tingling hand back into the pocket of my parka. He shrugged. Okay. As we headed up the steps, I added, We'll have to stay out here, though. Mother doesn't allow me to have boys in the house when she's not home. Okay, cool, he replied. We settled onto the top step, a respectable 1.5 feet between us. Our backpacks behind us, we stared out at the street. Mrs. Schmidt stared at us from behind the blinds in her living room. I waved. The blinds snapped shut. Who's that? Ben asked. Mrs. Schmidt, the neighborhood busybody. Good to know. Hard to avoid, I added. He smiled. Dimples appeared. I zipped my parka all the way up and stuffed my hands deep into my pockets. An awkward hush descended. It lingered until I could stand it no longer. So, are you and your mom doing okay? Settling in and everything? I asked. Yeah, we're getting used to things. It's different, but I think we'll be fine. Give it time, that's what my mom says. She's probably right, I said. I've lived in this town my whole life, so I can't exactly say I know what you're going through, but I can imagine it might take some time. He nodded. Again, the quiet simmered. My mind went blank. My one attempt to break the ice had failed. Finally, Ben turned my way. I wanted to come by and find out what happened to you last night. When I went to get the water, my mom got a hold of me. She said we had to get home. Did your mom tell you? I hope you don't think I bailed on you. Mother told me. I knew you hadn't deserted me on purpose. I stopped. How was I supposed to explain what happened to a guy I hardly knew? I didn't want to lose a friend before I made one. Okay, good, Ben said. Glad she told you. Did the water help? You seemed kind of freaked out. I wanted to scream and run for the hills for real. Why should I tell him? I hadn't even told Mel and Elle. What if he thought it was a joke? What if he thought I was a wacko? What if he told the kids at school? If they thought I was strange before, this would put me on the certifiably crazy list, which, to my knowledge, only had 2 current members in all of St. Gerard. Navanovich, who was known to throw things out the window of his spooky two-story brick house at any random passers-by, and Miss Finelson, who at the age of 93 had perfected the art of escaping from her room at the old folks' home and waltzing down Main Street in her silk pajamas. I was not eager to become number 3, but in the midst of convincing myself what a bad idea it was to spill the beans, something deep in my belly, beyond my ability to put into words, argued back. It told me I could trust him. I took a deep breath and looked straight into his eyes. "It's a long story," I began, "and once you hear it, you may not want to be seen with me. But you must promise me 2 things. Sounds interesting? What? First, you must promise not to tell anyone, except maybe your mom," I instructed. He nodded. "And second, when I finish and I ask you what you think, you must promise to be honest. Can you do that?" Without hesitation, he put out his hand and answered, "I can do that." I reached out my hand too. We shook on it. Then I began back where it all began, with Joseph and the baby catcher gate. He listened intently. From time to time he stopped me and had me repeat something, but it wasn't rude. It was more like he was trying to understand. When I started to explain the previous night's events, he leaned forward, elbows on knees and head in hands. I wasn't sure if I should include my dream from the night before, but then I thought, he may as well have the whole kit and caboodle, as Grandma used to say. So he heard about the green pasture, the picnic basket with the bundled babies, and the laughing king. As I told him, contentment and joy washed over me. When I finally stopped, Ben was leaning back against the porch rail, his feet extended, his face lifted to the clouds, his hands lost inside his sweatshirt pouch. Neither of us spoke. It felt like a thin place. "So," I asked, "what do you think?" Ben aimed his words more at the clouds than at me. "Honestly, I'm not quite sure what to think. You've experienced some pretty, intense stuff. Sounds like a movie or a book or something." He continued to stare off into the horizon. I wasn't sure what was going on in his head, but judging by his stillness, it seemed that my story had stirred something up inside him. I wondered if he would tell me what it was. It seemed as though he might. I waited. "When I was 7, he said quietly, his eyes still focused on a point in the distance, "my daddy left me and my mom. He was a traveling preacher. He'd be home one week and preach at our small church. The next week he'd be gone, filling the pulpit at another small church in the area. Turns out he was doing more than preaching in the other town. He had a whole other family there, a wife, a daughter, and a baby boy. One day he decided going back and forth between the towns, the churches, and the families was too much. So he stopped coming back to us." He peeked at me from under his long blonde bangs as if to check my reaction. Even though I wanted to drop my jaw in shock, I concentrated on keeping my face neutral. He seemed satisfied that it was safe to continue. "Guess he thought a wife and 2 kids needed him more than Mama and I needed him. Or maybe he just liked them better. I didn't even really know. When Mama went to find out, she found more than she bargained for. She came home by herself. Told me we were going to be a family of 2 from then on. The churches in both towns fired him when they found out what was going on. Daddy and his other family moved away. I didn't care. I hated him. I hated them. Every night when I went to bed, I would hear Mama praying and crying in her room. I didn't understand how she could still pray to a God who would let such bad stuff happen to us. The only prayer I prayed was, 'God, let them all die.'" Ben sat up and hunched forward, his arms crossed on his thighs. "One day I came home from school and found Mama sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in her hands. She was crying, which made me mad again. I wondered who had hurt her now. She told me it was a letter from her cousin who lived in the town my daddy had moved to. She thought we might want to know that he had fallen on some hard times. His other wife and daughter had left him after he had accidentally let the baby boy drown in the bathtub. He'd been drinking a great deal and had lost his job." Mama dropped the letter on the table and cried some more. I yelled, "How can you cry for him? This is what he deserves. I hope he dies too." Mama looked at me with such pain in her eyes. It was as if I had slapped her. Ben spoke so softly, I leaned closer to make sure I didn't miss a word. "Mama grabbed my hands and pulled me in," he continued. "She told me hate was a dangerous thing. She said I needed to find a way to forgive my daddy. If I didn't, it would poison my soul for the rest of my life. I didn't care. Hate was the only way I could punish him. If I forgave him, I would be letting him off the hook. He didn't deserve my forgiveness." Ben stopped for a moment. I sat perfectly still, afraid any movement might distract him or deter him from continuing. It was strangely comforting to hear his story, not that I enjoyed hearing of the painful events in his life, but by telling me, it was as if he were saying, "I don't really understand your story, but I accept it. Now, will you accept mine?" Oh, I love that. That's so good. "We were going to be friends. In fact, we already were. One day," Ben resumed, "Mama left me at my friend's house for an overnight. She went to see my daddy. For a long time, I didn't know why. I was just relieved that when she came home, she didn't have him with her. Turns out, she had helped him get into a rehab center. Guess the church helped her out. I don't know the details. She doesn't talk about it. All I know is that when she came back, she was at peace. Seemed like helping out the man who hurt her was her way of proving to herself and to him, and to me, that she would live what she believed, no matter how hard it was." He shook his head as if still perplexed by her courage. I was sort of jealous of her peace, but I wasn't ready to let go of my hate. In a way, my hate helped me ignore the other thing I felt: guilt. I kept hearing a voice in my head saying, "That baby boy died because you wanted him to die. It's your fault." Whenever that thought came, I flooded it out with hate for my daddy. It was his fault, not mine. For a long time, that's how I fell asleep at night. A wave of guilt, a wave of hate, back and forth. Then one night, when I was 11, I had a dream. It was different from any kind of dream I've ever had, and it was so real. He paused. He glimpsed at me as if to see if I was still with him. I was. In my dream, Ben continued, a man sat on a chair next to the edge of a cliff. The cliff overlooked a big ocean. As I walked to the man, I saw he was old and covered with green mold. Then he turned to me. I recognized him. It was my daddy. In a split second, hatred rose up in me and overwhelmed me. I grabbed him around the neck and began to strangle him. I wanted to kill him, but nothing happened. He didn't even put up a fight. It was as if he was already dead, but I kept squeezing anyway. Then I noticed the mold was beginning to cover my hands. It was moving up my arms all the way to my throat. It was heavy. I felt as if I was suffocating. Then the earth beneath my feet crumbled, and the entire cliff disappeared in an instant. Daddy and I were falling into the sea, my hands still around his neck. I was scared. Then a voice said, "Let go, and you will live." So I let go. The mold left, the heaviness lifted, and I could breathe. I was still falling, but for some reason I wasn't afraid, and I woke up. He stopped and looked my way. I gave him a little smile. He forged ahead. I knew what the dream meant, so I prayed right there in my bed, "God, I don't want to be full of hatred anymore. I forgive my daddy." It was that simple, a choice to let go. I fell back asleep with waves of peace instead of hatred for the first time in a long time. Ben dropped his head. "You're the only one who's ever heard that story besides Mama." A small smirk crept onto my face as I replied, "Well, I guess we're even then." I was rewarded with a dimpled half grin. "Yes, I guess so." We sat in silence for a while, but it wasn't an awkward silence anymore. It was the silence of two old friends. I didn't want to break the peacefulness, but I had a question I needed to ask. "Hey, you know how you said you used to fall asleep on waves of hate and guilt? Yeah? Well, I'm wondering. I don't mean to be nosy, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but you said the anger left once you forgave your daddy. But what about the guilt? Have you asked God to forgive you?" "Only about 1,000,000 times," he said, "but I don't think I deserve to be forgiven. Maybe if I hadn't prayed those prayers, my brother would still be alive." I stopped to think about my next step. Well, I don't think forgiveness is really about whether we deserve it or not. "Come on, girlfriend, go there." Ben stared back down into his hands. He didn't say anything when he looked at me. Tears coursed down his cheeks. His face was so troubled and tender, he appeared years younger than his age. Tears welled up in my eyes. I scooted across the respectable 1.5 feet and put a hand on his shoulder. It seemed to help. I felt him shudder as he drew in a ragged breath. "He was my baby brother," he said quietly, "but all I ever felt for him was hate. Now I'll never get the chance to know him. Maybe one day he and I might have been friends, but I asked God every night to let him die, and he did. He let him die." Ben shook his head. "No, I think I'll have to live with the guilt. Maybe it's my way of keeping him alive." Oof, my gosh. I let my hand slip from his shoulder but remained next to him. I was at a loss for words. Then a still, small voice echoed inside my heart. "Be gentle." I waded into his pain. Oh, I love that. I waded into his pain. That's so good. "Ooh. Well," I said, "your baby brother is alive, but your holding on to guilt isn't the reason why. To the king, everyone is living. We're simply not all in the same place at the moment. One day you will get to know your brother, but you must trust the king. He didn't let your brother die because you asked him to. From what I know about the king, I don't think that's a prayer he takes too seriously. He knows you didn't really know what you were asking. Besides, he's a good king, and he can't do anything bad. I don't know why your brother died, but I do know it wasn't your fault. The king simply has a time for everything. He told me he makes everything beautiful in its time." Wow. Oh, that's so good. Ben remained staring downward, but his shoulders relaxed. When he raised his head, he put both hands to his face and wiped away the tears. He looked 12 again, maybe even 13. "I'll think about that," he said. "Thanks, Pearl. And thanks for telling me about last night and everything." He looked me right in the eyes. A funny shyness swept across his features, and he dropped his gaze. "I wasn't sure if I would find a friend in this town, let alone a friend as, well, let's just say as peculiar as you." It wasn't exactly the word I was hoping to hear, but his voice was so sincere my heart fluttered. I inhaled and studied my fingernails. A quick sideways glance revealed that he was studying me.
I was immensely relieved when he spoke up and said, "I better head home. And don't worry, next time I'll give you fair warning before I show up on your front porch." He stood and pulled up his hood, slung on his backpack, and leapt down the steps, landing cat-like next to his bike. I sat and watched him pedal away. I smiled to myself. Peculiar.
Oh, that's so cute.
Okay, chapter 16. Girl talk. After supper, Mother took the cordless phone into the front room. This meant she had a call to make that required a certain level of privacy. I sat at the kitchen table with my sketchpad before me, keeping one ear tuned to the living room to figure out who she was calling. I preferred not to think of it as eavesdropping. Mother didn't approve of that practice. I preferred to think of it as valuable tidbit hunting. I wanted... Oh, shoot. That's so cute. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but I figured if Mother truly wanted a private conversation, she would take the phone to her bedroom. I considered the front room fair game. Most of her calls were to clients anyway. Those conversations didn't interest me in the least, but on occasion I gathered valuable tidbits when the party on the other end was a family member, a neighbor, or someone else who might be of interest to me. Tidbit hunting proved challenging that night. I was still stirred up after my conversation with Ben. Plus, I was trying to focus on sketching Timothy and Siobhan. My mind flitted back and forth between the two equally compelling subject matters, and when I determined Mother was calling Susan, my focus was divided even further. Eventually, however, the baby sketches won my complete attention, and I gave myself to the process of moving the images in my head onto my sketchpad. I began with Siobhan's tawny face and shiny black curls. I labored over her puckered lips and dark eyes, so consumed that all was lost to me, except the portrait of this precious baby girl. When I glanced at the clock, I was surprised to see an hour had flown by. I was equally surprised to hear Mother still on the phone. She didn't generally engage in lengthy phone conversations. Even long-distance calls to my sister or brother, which had resumed thanks to my stay in the hospital, were usually kept under 30 minutes. I set down the dusty pink eraser and listened as I stood and moved to the sink to refill my water glass. It just so happened that the sink was closer to the opening to the living room, which may or may not have contributed to my sudden thirst. I filled my glass and sipped with my ears strained on the other room. I filled my glass and sipped with my ears... Oh my gosh, I just read that sentence.
Oh, Lord.
It just so happened that the sink was closer to the opening to the living room, which may or may not have contributed to my sudden thirst. I filled my glass and sipped with my ears trained on the other room. I was rewarded with the name Scott Stewart and a phone number being read off. A very valuable tidbit. They must have been talking about the art appreciation night. I wondered if Mother had told her about my visions or hallucinations, or whatever you called them. "Pearl, as long as you're listening, would you care to chat with your sister?" Mother asked from the living room. I was baffled. How did she know I was listening? Listening doesn't sound like anything. Oh, maybe that's how she knows. "Sure," I replied, setting my glass on the counter as I strolled forward, the all-knowing one. She handed me the phone. "Keep it short, please. I've already run up the bill." "Hey, Susan," I said as I plunked onto the recliner. "Hey, short stuff. How you doing?" "Pretty good. You?" "Super busy, but hanging in there," Susan replied. "Sometimes I wonder what I've gotten myself into. There's so much to learn. It's overwhelming at times." "Yeah, I'll bet." "So, I hear you met Scott Stewart last night and saw his photography. What did you think?" "I think you should call him." She laughed. "That's not what I meant." "Well, it's what I meant," I said as I launched into my sales pitch. "He's cute, he's talented, he owns a business, he lives in the same city as you, he went to school with you. Why wouldn't you call him? Unless, of course, you've already got another hunk on the line." "Listen to you, you little matchmaker. It's not always so simple. My schedule is crammed to the max. You gotta take a break sometime. Anyways, I'm not saying you have to marry him or anything, although that might not be a bad idea. I'm only saying you should give him a call and see what happens." Okay, dear Abby. Maybe I will," she said. "I confess I am a bit curious, and I could use a little fun." "Great," I said, feeling pleased with my ability to close the deal. "Make sure I'm the first one you call after your first date." Hey, hold on there. I said I'd call him. I didn't say I'd date him." "Yeah, whatever. It's not what you said, but it's what you meant. True?" The phone was silent for a moment. "Okay," she responded. "Okay, what?" "Okay, if the phone call turns into a date, you'll be the first one I call." "Yahoo!" I yelled little into the receiver. She laughed. I kicked off my slippers and sprawled sideways across the chair, my feet dangling over one puffy stuffed arm and my neck over the other. Her laughter faded. "Hey, kiddo," she began, switching gears. "Can I ask you a serious question?" I had an inkling I knew where this was going. "Sure," I answered, my head still hanging upside down. "Have you drawn the babies you saw in Scott's photos?" My feet stopped swinging. Suspicions confirmed. I was sketching the little girl before Mother handed me the phone. "I hope you're not upset she told me everything." "Nah, it's okay," I said as I scooched into an upright position and blinked away the stars from my eyes, aware that I would need a clear brain for the rest of this conversation. Saves me from having to repeat it. Sometimes I wonder if it's even real. But then I sketch and it's like those babies come alive on my paper, and I know I'm not making it all up. "Hey, listen," she said. "I'm convinced you're not making it up. I actually think it's pretty cool. Makes me think about things beyond my textbooks and labs. Bigger things. And guess what?" "What?" "Those thoughts give me peace and joy, sorta all mixed up with hope." She paused before adding, "Whatever happened to you, it's helped me. so thanks for letting me in on it. When an older sister thanks a younger sister for helping her, it's a topsy-turvy moment. It felt uncomfortably wonderful. You're welcome, I replied. Okay, I'd better go, but don't worry if, and that is a big if, this Scott Stewart thing develops into anything. You'll be the first one I call. Okay, deal. Good night, Susan. Love you. Love you too, kiddo. I sat contentedly on the recliner, relishing the thought of Susan dating Scott Stewart as if it were an accomplished fact. What if she married him? Susan Stewart. Sounded nice. When the phone rang in my hand, I jumped. The receiver dropped onto the floor. I scrambled to find it under the coffee table before whoever was calling could hang up. I recovered it and yelled, I've got it! Okay, Mother yelled back from the kitchen. Hello, this is Pearl, I answered from my hands and knees. Okay, Pearl, give me the scoop. What's he like? Mel? What's who like? Oh, come on, you know who he is. We made a pledge, remember? She was asking about Ben. I sat down on the floor, my back against the couch. With my knees drawn to my chest, I pondered what to tell her. A yellow flag popped up in my heart. I proceeded with caution. What do you mean exactly? What do I mean? I saw you on your front porch this afternoon with Ben Bradley. Didn't you see me wave when my mom and I drove by? I didn't want to tell her anything, but I knew Mel. She would never let me off the hook if I didn't give her something to chew on. Besides, we had made a pact. I wondered how much information was required to fulfill a pinky's worth of promise. I was glad we didn't shake hands on it. Hello? Pearl? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here, I said. And no, I didn't see you drive by. Sorry. Well, it appeared as if you were in deep conversation. What was it all about? Oh, it wasn't much. He, had a question about our history homework. As I said it, I knew it was a lie, but somehow it seemed better than revealing the truth. A homework question? It didn't look like a homework kind of question. Well, it was. He was confused. Besides, how could you tell what kind of conversation it was? Geez, you don't have to get all defensive. It looked like more than a homework conversation because you had your hand on his shoulder. Oh, that, I backed down. Well, that was because he's new here and he doesn't think he's going to find any friends in this little town. Which was true, I consoled myself. I swore I heard the wheels turning in her head. So, does he think he's found a friend in you? Her question felt heavy with a jealousy I didn't want to feed. Maybe, maybe not, I replied. He told me he thinks I'm peculiar. Peculiar? A new voice joined the conversation. Tiff, I told you to stay quiet, Mel rebuked the unseen, valuable tidbit hunter. Tiffany? Sorry, Pearl, for eavesdropping, but I just can't believe he actually said that to you. How rude, Tiffany blurted. Tiff is just hanging out till her dad picks her up, and she was in the car when we drove by, and we just got super curious, and... I'm sorry, Pearl. I should have told you she was listening. Of all people, Tiffany Paulson, the class tattletale. Did he really say peculiar? Mel asked, sounding embarrassed both for herself and for me. Honest, cross my heart, that's what he said, I assured her. Well, Pearl, Tiffany jumped back in, don't you worry about what he says. We all know you're, well, maybe slightly odd, but that's just you. Don't let some new boy upset you. He'll learn, 'cause underneath it all, you're pretty much normal. My gosh. Although her words were kinda nice, I could tell she was relieved to think that the conversation between Ben and me had ended badly. I'd given a pinky's worth. Hey, Mel, I've gotta go. I intentionally omitted Tiffany in my sign-off. Yeah, okay, Mel said quietly. And Pearl, I really am sorry. Me too. I don't know if I even want to get to know a guy with such bad manners, Tiffany added, completely oblivious to the fact that she was the reason Mel was feeling sorry. See you tomorrow. I clicked off the receiver before she could add anything else to the already disastrous chat. Mother stepped into the door, drying a pan with a checkered kitchen towel. What was all that about? She asked. Nothing much, I said. Just the end of the world as I knew it. Gosh, that's so interesting. It's such an interesting dynamic, I feel like, for kids. And that's one of those things that I want as a parent to make sure that I am being a safe place for my kids for those times where, they may be hanging out with a friend and they get uncomfortable or whatever it may be, and having like a safe word so that I can help them like get out of a situation that they don't want to be in. But it doesn't make it like super awkward. I just think that's interesting. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay. Interlude. The King. Ilsa's voice carries over the hubbub. John, over here. Her waving hands barely visible over the sea of humanity that stretches out around me. I advance in her direction. I've chosen to walk to our designated spot so I can more fully absorb the spectacle around me. As I go, I glance over to the massive stone platform that rises about 4 stories tall in the midst of the throng. Its polished black surface shines like a deep, still pool and reflects the brightly arrayed crowd gathered around its base. A stairway carved into the side of the stone zigzags up to the top, where an enormous golden bowl stands on a white marble altar. Around the brim of the bowl, engraved in flowing script, are the words, on earth as it is in heaven. Okay, wait. Okay, hold on for a second. I feel like I need to I read that whole paragraph, but I feel like I didn't actually take it into my brain, so I'm going to redo that. But I needed a drink of water. Okay. Interlude, the king. Ilsa's voice carries over the hubbub. John, over here. Her waving hands barely visible over the sea of humanity that stretches out around me, I advance in her direction. I've chosen to walk to our designated spot so I can more fully absorb the spectacle around me. As I go, I glance over to the massive stone platform that rises about 4 stories tall in the midst of the throng. Its polished black surface shines like a deep, still pool and reflects the brightly arrayed crowd gathered around its base. A stairway carved into the side of the stone zigzags up to the top, where an enormous golden bowl stands on a white marble altar. Around the brim of the bowl, engraved in flowing script, are the words, "On earth as it is in heaven." The atmosphere buzzes with excited chatter. Overhead, thousands upon 10,000s of winged hosts hover in brilliant finery. Spontaneous songs burst out here and there from the assembled masses, each one delightful in its unique melody. Some sweep like wildfire across the room, igniting a mighty chorus, colossal in power, overwhelming in goodness and joy. Family and friends greet me when I arrive. William sidles up next to me, and I wrap my arm around his shoulder. Hey, buddy. Hey, Dad. This is really something, eh? I'm gonna pause and highlight this paragraph really quick. I love, and this is something I've really appreciated throughout this whole book, I love how she describes, so there's a couple things. I love how she describes the things that are heavenly or in heaven, and this whole concept of her giving glimpses of the people that are in heaven. And obviously, I mean, people can have encounters like Pearl is having in this moment, and so they can see glimpses of what heaven is, but there's so many things that we don't know about heaven, and we're not going to know until we get there. But I love how she's kind of like creating this world and having these thoughts that are all rooted very clearly in biblical truth, but it's, it's fiction, and so she's kind of embellishing it, or not even embellishing it, but just, creating a bigger picture, which is so cool. But then the other thing I've loved is how she explains in creative ways simple or concepts, biblical concepts, theological concepts, but explaining it in a way that makes it so simple, and it just hits differently, and I love it. It's so good. Okay. So, William sidles up next to me, and I wrap my arm around his shoulder. Hey, buddy. Hey, Dad. This is really something, eh? For sure. He nods, then suddenly points toward the platform. Look up there. The king is here. The entire assembly erupts in praise as the resplendent figure of the king appears on the podium. He is at once majestic and humble, familiar and foreign, ferocious and gentle, the lion and the lamb. How can he be so far from us, and yet he feels like he's right next to us? Will asks over the sustained ovation. Always full of questions, this one. My son. My William. He's mysterious that way, I say with a shrug, along with a bunch of other ways. That's for sure, Ilsa adds from beside me. I always thought once we arrived here the mysteries of life would be explained. Turns out to be true on some levels, but by and large, the unsolved of this realm far outweighs the solved of the last one. Really? Will asks. I suppose you wouldn't know, Ilsa says, caressing his cheek. Trust me, you've got plenty of mysteries here to keep you occupied for eternity. I know, but just once I'd like to go to the other side, he says, looking out over the crowd to the platform. The king did. He has a point. Trumpets sound from above, and our attention pivots back to the center of the gathering. A holy hush settles over the throng. Do you know why we've been gathered? Will whispers. Special occasion was all I heard, I whisper back before Ilsa shushes the both of us. 24 elders, robed in white and with crowns on their heads, begin to climb the stairs to the top of the platform in solemn single file. Clouds of incense drift up from the polished ceramic bowls that fill their arms, sending a spicy, sweet aroma over the assembly. Anticipation builds as the elders reach the platform summit, bow their heads to the king, and form a circle around the base of the large center bowl. 24 resplendent hosts descend from on high and lift the earthenware from the elders' arms. Upward they fly until they hover over the heart of the altar. In unity, they face the king and wait. He turns to the east, and all eyes follow his gaze. A dazzling flash lights the horizon, accompanied by a low rumble like that of a legion of timpani. He turns back to the altar, lifts his hands, and commands, "Begin." The crowd cheers as the winged hosts, one after the other, lift their bowls overhead and tip the contents into the gigantic receiving bowl. Multi-hued embers flare from its midst with each new deposit, and we in turn break into praise along with all the heavenly hosts. Blessing and honor and glory and power be unto the Ancient of Days. Over and over we sing with gusto as the outpouring continues. When the 24th host lifts his bowl overhead, the crowd falls silent as he turns back to the king and announces, "In your presence and the presence of all those gathered here, I deposit the prayers of the saints and declare, by the authority of the Father, a season of overflow." "Yes and amen," the king affirms in a resounding voice. "Yes and amen," we echo in one accord. The host raises his bowl, and as its contents flow into the amalgamation, a wondrous smoky vapor of every color imaginable and unimaginable spills over the golden brim. Gushing and swirling, the glorious smoke envelops the platform and rushes out over the crowd with its heady aroma. The elders fall prostrate before the king. The hosts cover their faces with their wings, and every knee across the entire throng bends as the overflow shrouds us in weighty glory. Silence reigns. Oh my gosh. This is insane! Oh my gosh. I feel like I can't even process this right now. Wow. Gosh. Sorry, I'm just like reflecting and trying to make sure I'm fully grasping this right now. Okay. The elders fall prostrate before the king. The hosts cover their faces with their wings, and every knee across the entire throng bends as the overflow shrouds us in weighty glory. Silence reigns. When at last the vibrant vapor dissipates, we rise from our knees. The king and the elders are gone. Overhead, the heavenly hosts disperse in every direction, swiftly, profusely, and the throng disbands in quiet awe. "What happens now?" William asks as he, Ilsa, and I walk together. "Wondrous things," I reply. "Have you seen this before?" Ilsa says. "Just once." "And?" Will prompts. "And we will have to see what he has in mind. From what I've heard, each season of overflow is peculiar unto itself." Peculiar? That word is gonna come back. I love that. "But what happened in the last overflow?" he asks. "It's hard to describe," I say as we continue our homeward journey. "A thinness in the boundaries. Unusual encounters." "Do you suppose that's why she was here?" Ilsa asks. "Could be," I say, nodding. "Who?" William grabs my arm. "Who was here?" I look at Ilsa. She looks at me. "Pearl," we say in unison. Ah! Okay, next chapter. Chapter 17, Spread the Word. Someone knocked at our door early the next morning. Mother answered it since I wasn't fully dressed yet. I snuck my head into the hallway to listen. Hi," he said. "I'm Ben Bradley, a friend of Pearl's." My hand slipped from the doorframe and I stubbed my toe trying to catch my balance. "Oh yes, Mr. Bradley," I heard Mother reply as I hopped up and down in pain. "I remember you from the other night. Come on in." "Oh, I don't need to come in. I was just wondering if Pearl wanted to bike to school with me." "Well," Mother said, "you can ask her yourself, but you will need to come in, because she isn't quite ready yet." "Okay," he replied. "I guess I am a little early." "Not a problem," Mother said. "I'll go get her." The front door closed and I hopped back into my room, scurrying to zip up my jeans, throw on my sweatshirt, which was suddenly seemed frumpy and unsatisfactory, and brush my hair. Mother knocked and entered. "So, I assume you heard all of that?" she said with a amused look on her face. "Better get your bottom in gear if you want to ride with him." I was surprised, delighted, and nervous as I smeared strawberry lip smacker over my lips before rushing out to meet Ben in the entryway. "Hey," I said, slightly out of breath. "Hey," he replied. "Want to bike to school together?" "Sure," I said. I just stood there, like a dork. You ready to go?" he asked. "Just about," I said, coming to my senses. I stuffed my feet into my clogs, grabbed a jacket off the hook by the door, and retrieved my backpack from atop the bookshelf. "I wasn't expecting you. Again." "Yeah, I should have warned you. Again. Sorry." "No biggie," I said, "but my house isn't exactly on your route to school." He dropped his chin. "Yeah, well, Mother joined us from the kitchen with my lunch. "Well, I think it is quite chivalrous of him to make the extra effort," she said, handing me the brown paper bag. She checked her watch. "Time to get moving," she said, and opened the door. Out we went. I wasn't quite sure what chivalrous meant, but I did understand extra effort, and I was pleased beyond words to think that Ben Bradley had gone out of his way to show up at my front door that morning. We stopped at the corner of Quince? Of Quince, I think. Quince? I don't know. My gosh. We stopped at the corner of Quince and 10th to wait for Mel and Elle. "Hey guys," I said as they halted next to us. "This is Ben Bradley. Ben, these are my friends Mel and Elle." "Hey," he said with a quick wave. "Think we've got science together," he said to Elle. She didn't respond. "And aren't you in my English class?" he asked Mel. She, too, remained in a state of dazed silence. Are they always this quiet? Ben asked. Trust me when I say this is a rare occurrence. Enjoy it, I said, pushing off and starting to pedal. The others followed suit. Mel quickly pulled alongside me. About last night, she said in a voice meant only for me. What's done is done, I said. Don't worry about it. I am truly, honestly, completely sorry, she added. I nodded and pedaled faster to catch up with Ben and Elle, who had sped by us and were chattering away. The moment of muteness had passed. By the time we had locked our bikes in the stand by the school steps. My gosh, I need to slow down a little bit. The moment of muteness had passed. By the time we had locked our bikes in the stand by the school steps, Mel had joined in the prattle, and they were all laughing like long-lost buddies. I was glad they were getting to know Ben, but I also kind of wished I could keep him to myself. Inside the school doors, Mel and Elle peeled off to their lockers on the west wing. See you at second lunch? Mel asked while walking backward. I've got first lunch, sorry, Ben replied. Mel's face registered her disappointment. After school, then? Mel, watch. Elle's warning came too late to save Mel from running smack dab into Tiffany Paulson, who was absorbed in her own conversation with Reggie Dumfrey. Mel bounced off Tiffany and was saved from a complete faceplant by Elle's quick reflexes. Tiffany was not so lucky. She flew backward and landed squarely on her bottom before smacking up against a locker. Tears quickly filled her eyes and crimson flushed her cheeks. Ben ran to her side. Geez, Elfspit, can't you keep your friend from running over people? Reggie barked. Oh my gosh, what the heck? Elle's cheeks flamed as red as her hair and fire lit her eyes, but her tongue stayed tied. And what about you, you big bully? I spit out before I could stop myself. You were standing right next to Tiff and you didn't even try to catch her. Ooh, Granny. Or should I call you Peculiar Pearl? Gonna be all brave, are ya? Reggie loomed closer, his finger pointed at my chest. Guess Romy over there figured you out in no time. Peculiar Pearl, the airhead girl. My eyes blurred. Tiffany hadn't wasted any time in sharing her valuable tidbit. She's not peculiar, she's just... Mel tried to come to my aid. Just what? Super peculiar? Reggie leaned in and wagged his grinning mug in our faces. He seemed delighted to see us all flummoxed. Great word, flummoxed, great word. Hey, you! Ben spun Reggie around and grabbed him by the front of his shirt, despite his significant disadvantage in size. What are you saying about my friends? For a split second, Reggie was so stunned he couldn't respond. But that didn't last long. Enraged by Ben's audacity, he broke the hold on his shirt and shoved them against the lockers with a resounding bang. Miss Wells dashed out of her classroom and into the midst of the fray. What is going on here? She demanded, striking a formidable pose in the middle of the hallway. Reggie unclenched his fist and pretended to smooth Ben's shirt. Nothing, Teach, he said. Just a little accident. Seeing Tiffany still leaning against the wall, Miss Wells bent to assess her condition. Reggie took the opportunity to say right in my ear, Be seeing ya, peculiar. Everybody, get to your classes, Miss Wells ordered. I will take Tiffany down to the nurse's office. Now go, or you'll all get detention. Mel and Elle retreated toward their lockers along with Reggie and the small contingency of onlookers who had accumulated. Ben and I headed the other direction. What was that all about? He asked after we had distanced ourselves from the scene of the crime. Oh, it's just Reggie being himself, a big fat bully. Why was he calling you peculiar? Did you tell him what I said? Are you kidding? Of course not. Well, he must have heard it from somewhere. The first bell rang, thank goodness. I didn't want to have to tell him about my phone conversation with Mel and Tiffany. I hadn't really told him anything. Actually, only one word. One lousy word. I could hardly imagine what Reggie might have done with the rest of the story. I'll explain later, I said, hoping against hope that I wouldn't have to. The day did not improve from there. In first period math, we had a pop quiz. I failed. In biology, we dissected worms. I puked. In health class, the boys left the classroom with Coach Spencer, while we girls remained with Mrs. Weiss. It was time for the lesson on the birds and the bees, which left everyone all Twitter-pated, except me. Old news in my book. Fair. In English, we were supposed to hand in our essays. Mine lay on the kitchen table where I had left it in my haste to get out the door with Ben that morning. Not only that, but both Reggie and Tiffany were in that class. She was evidently fully recovered from her humiliation, and Reggie acted as if he had been her hero, boasting in hushed asides to his gang about saving her from Romeo and Peculiar, as if Ben and I were some comic book crime duo. Miss Wells had to shush him more than once. Finally, when one of his comments sent too many ripples of laughter through his audience, she announced, Mr. Dumfrey, meet me in the hallway. He sat defiantly in his desk. She glared at him and strode toward him until all 5 feet and 10 inches of her solid frame loomed over him. Move it, Reggie, she ordered. Begrudgingly, he did so, and she followed him out the door. When she returned, Mr. Dumfrey was not with her. If anyone else would like to join your pal in the principal's office, she announced, just keep up your foolishness, and I will accommodate your wishes. The remainder of the hour went by without incident, but by the end of it, I could compose myself no longer. I sat at my desk until everyone left, laid my head on my folded arms, and dissolved into tears. I didn't care if I missed lunch. I'd lost my appetite. A gentle hand touched my shoulder. Pearl, can I help? I lifted my head. Miss Wells was crouched next to me in the aisle. She handed me a tissue. Don't let him get to you, she offered. I was glad she knew exactly what, or who, the problem was. I try not to, I said, attempting to bring my tears to a halt. He's just an insecure kid who thinks he'll feel better about himself if he can make someone else feel worse. I nodded and blew my nose. I heard what he called you this morning, she said softly. The waterworks started afresh. She handed me another tissue. Did Reggie throw something at you? I shook my head. No. Why? Well, it's just that you've got glitter or something all over your shoulders. I do? I looked down, and sure enough, my shoulders were covered in gold dandruff-like stuff. What is it? I don't know, she said, brushing some of the dust onto her hand, but it's quite lovely. Look. She held it up for my perusal, and it glistened under the fluorescent lights. I had seen this before somewhere. It looks like my bowl. Your what? Just some pottery I made this summer. Maybe you brushed up against it this morning or something, she said, reaching for an explanation. It was better than anything I could come up with. Maybe. If I were you, I'd just leave it where it is, Miss Wells said. It gives you a certain peculiar glow. Her eyes projected kindness, but the mere reminder of the word jolted me. Tears leapt back into my eyes. Hey, she patted my arm. I don't think it's a bad thing to be called peculiar. I know Reggie meant it in a mean way, but it can actually mean something really positive. She pulled a thesaurus out from the desk across the aisle and squeezed onto the seat. Let's see, she said, thumbing through the pages. Peculiar can also mean unique, special, individual, particular, and distinctive. That sounds pretty cool if you ask me. I pulled in a ragged breath. I think that's what he meant. Reggie? No, Ben. Ben Bradley. He told me he was glad to have met someone as peculiar as me Oh, okay, wait, sorry. I pulled in a ragged breath. I think that's what he meant. Pearl was saying that, not the teacher. Sorry. Reggie? No, Ben. Ben Bradley. He told me he was glad to have met someone as peculiar as me in this small town. Ah, I see. Well, I happen to agree with Mr. Bradley. You are a unique young lady, and I think you have some peculiar qualities that will make the world a better place if you will share them. We just need you to be you. From there, the day got better. By the time the last bell had rung and me and my buddies were pedaling home, the knot in my stomach had untied itself. Ben didn't push me for details about the origin of Reggie's knowledge. I hoped he would forget about it. I knew Reggie wouldn't. Wow. Chapter 18, Dinner Party. The following week, Mel achieved a lifelong goal. She won a spot on the cheer squad. Then Elle debated her way onto the high school junior varsity debate team, where she was by far the youngest member. Mark Pakowski was the captain. Excuse me. She and Mel were both thrilled to stay after school for their activities. So, after that first week of all four of us communing together, Ben and I rode back to my house after school by ourselves. Although I missed my gal pal's company, I was thrilled to have Ben to myself. The front porch became our hangout. Some days we talked nonstop. Other days we took out our sketch pads and drew. He was great at drawing birds and animals, but he preferred to draw cartoons. Most of his cartoons were downright ridiculous, with crazy caricatures of everyone from the principal to the postman, but some were quite thought-provoking, like the one he drew on Arbor Day with Paul Bunyan setting his axe aside to plant a pine tree seedling. On days Mother came home early, we went inside and sat at the kitchen table. She plied us with snacks like carrots, apple slices, and cheese sticks. Having a health-conscious mother had its downside. Occasionally, she surprised us with cookies or bars, but even those were full of raisins, oatmeal, and nuts. Ben never complained. He stayed and he worked on our homework while we munched on our snacks. Some kids teased us as we rode past them after school. We made a point of avoiding Reggie and his gang. The others were pretty harmless, and they didn't seem to bother Ben, so I decided I wasn't going to let them bother me either. One day, in early November, we sat on the front porch with our parka hoods pulled over our heads. An icy north wind had whipped in from Canada. We realized that soon we wouldn't be able to ride our bikes to school or sit out on the front porch, at least not without freezing. It wasn't a pleasant thought. Ben's mom said his grandpa needed complete peace and quiet, so we couldn't go there. We were discussing alternative hangouts like the library or the bowling alley when the phone rang inside. I jumped up to answer it. You can leave if you want, I told Ben, but I shouldn't be too long. I pulled off my gloves. Sorry, the garbage truck is going outside. You can leave if you want, I told Ben, but I shouldn't be too long. I pulled off my gloves. They seemed to have done little in the way of actually keeping my hands warm. I fumbled the keys twice before succeeding in unlocking the door. Then I rushed across the entryway into the kitchen to grab the phone. Hello, this is Pearl, I blurted. Hello, sweetheart, are you okay? Are you and Ben sitting out on the front porch in this frigid wind? Yeah, I guess. You guess? Are you or aren't you? Yes, we are, I clarified. Why? I'm leaving work soon. If you want, you can invite him in for some Ovaltine. I will be home shortly. Just gonna stop by the Red Owl and get some groceries. Thanks. See you soon. I hung up and dashed back outside. Ben was still there, hunkered over with his chin tucked into his jacket. Hey, want some hot Ovaltine? Mother said you can come in if you want. She'll be home in a few minutes. He popped up from the step and grabbed his backpack with an exaggerated shake of his limbs. Thank the Lord, he chattered. Thought I was going to freeze to the step and you would have to chisel me free. Ovaltine sounds terrific. What the heck is Ovaltine? I gotta Google it. It's gonna bug me. Oh, Google. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. What is Ovaltine? Ovaltine is a popular brand of malt-flavored milk mix containing malt extract, sugar, and whey, often mixed with cocoa. Originally developed in Switzerland in 1904 as a nutritional supplement, it is a fortified beverage designed to be mixed with hot or cold milk to provide essential vitamins and minerals. Interesting. I've never heard of that in my entire life. Okay. We hurried inside, hung up our coats, and prepared our warm drinks. I scrounged through the cupboards searching for possible snacks. All I can find is graham crackers, I said. Perfect, Ben replied. My favorite. Out came the box and off came the wrappers. We broke the stacks into halves, divided them between us, and sat down to indulge ourselves and chat about the day. Eventually, we pulled out our homework and attempted to accomplish something productive. Just as my mind began to wrap around the question on my science worksheet, Mother rapped on the door, her arms full of groceries. Ben jumped up and opened the door. He grabbed a precariously balanced bag as Mother maneuvered her way inside. Oh, thank you, Ben, Mother gushed. I guess I overestimated my capacity. I hated to have to make 2 trips in this nasty wind. You're welcome, he replied. I don't blame you. It's cold out there. Thanks for inviting me in. I helped Mother pull groceries from the bags and put them away in the cupboards. Sweetheart, Mother instructed, please leave out the chicken and noodles. I'm going to make a big pot of soup. I've invited Teacher Ann for dinner. You're welcome to stay too, Ben, if your mom says it's okay. Why don't you give her a call? Wow, thanks. That sounds great. I'll check. My grandpa's been pretty sick this week. She's had to run him back and forth to the hospital a couple times. Once it was the middle of the night. She didn't get home until after I left for school. She's a little worn out, I think. I'm sorry to hear that. Mother had stopped to listen. I'll give her a call tomorrow and see if there might be something we can do to help. One of the benefits of living in a small town is that people know one another, and there's always someone willing to give a hand. Ben gave her a grateful nod before he reached for the phone. I wasn't so sure all the people in town would be willing to help, but from where I stood, a fair number of them seemed grumpy half the time, and not too inclined to get involved in somebody else's trouble. But if anyone could find a way to help, it was Mother. Ben got the okay from his mom, and my mom put us to work. Teacher Ann rang the doorbell promptly at 6 o'clock. I greeted her at the front door. Hey, teacher, come on in out of the cold. Ooh la la, it is getting downright frigid out there, she said, coming in through the door with a shiver. But can't complain too loudly. It is November, after all. C'est la vie. I offered to take her coat. She handed it to me, and I hung it in the front closet. When I came back to her side, she was staring at the large family picture in the hallway. That's me, I said, pointing to the chubby baby. I was a year old. And adorable, she commented. That's my sister Susan, my brother David, and my daddy John, I added, assuming she could figure out which one was Mother. She nodded slowly. Yes, I recognize them all. I knew your daddy quite well. You did? Sure did. I paused. I didn't. She put an arm around my shoulders. And that is a shame, my young friend. John was a good man and a great father. That's what Susan says. Well, she is right. She gave my shoulder a quick squeeze. Shall we find your mother? I led the way into the kitchen. Mother turned from the pot on the stove and wiped her hands on her apron. She took one step toward Teacher and stopped. Welcome, she said. I am glad you could make it on such short notice. Her voice was stiff and her greeting a bit formal. Teacher didn't respond right away. Her eyes grew moist. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the room. I looked from Teacher to Mother and back again. No one said a word. Then they both spoke up at once. I meant to call after. They both shook their heads and smiled. Mother stepped forward and placed a hand on Teacher's arm. Let's not talk about it right now, Anne. I am so pleased to have you here again. Teacher placed her hand over Mother's, and I am so pleased to be here again. There's obviously a history there, but we don't quite know yet, so. Ben tromped around the corner from the bathroom into the kitchen. Teacher jerked her head around. Mr. Bradley, I didn't expect to find you here. Are you joining us for dinner? Yes, ma'am, I am, he said, looking back and forth between the 2 older women. I hope you don't mind if I crash the party. Teacher laughed. Ben's entrance had diffused the tension in the room. Not at all. Always nice to have a gentleman in the mix, she turned to Mother. It seems absolutely divine in here. What are you making? Seems. It smells absolutely divine in here. What are you making? I'm stumbling over my words a little bit more today than I normally do, but that's okay. It happens. Let's see. It smells absolutely divine in here. What are you making? Oh, it's just a soup recipe my mother used to make on cold, blustery days, Mother said. Pearl and Ben have whipped together some biscuits, too. It'll be simple fare tonight, but hearty and warm. Let me find my contribution, Teacher said, as she dug into her voluminous leather purse. She pulled out an aluminum foil packet and handed it to me. You can peek in there if you'd like. We'll save these for after dinner. They're fresh from the oven. I unfolded one corner of the packet. Ben swooped over to peek inside with me. The scent of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies escaped into the room. We oohed and awed at the golden stack we spied inside. This totally deserves a high five, Ben said, lifting his hand. I slapped it with gusto. Teacher burst out in laughter at our enthusiastic reception. I wasn't sure she understood how much of a treat this was in our house. Though we were only a party of 4 that night, something in the air wooed us out of the kitchen where Mother and I normally ate dinner and into the dining room, a room we reserved mostly for larger gatherings like Thanksgiving or birthday parties. Mother pulled out the good dishes and linen placemats. Ben and I set the table. Carried along by the festive atmosphere, I dug through the drawer of the china hutch and found the crystal candle holders and 2 tapered candles. Before we sat down to eat, I lit them and dimmed the lights. With steaming bowls of soup in front of us, we bowed our heads. Mother asked a blessing. For what we are about to receive from the bounty of your hand, dear Lord, we are truly grateful. For the warm food before us, for friends at our table, for life and breath, we give you thanks. In Jesus' name.
Wow, I love that. Also, love that she said Mother asked for a blessing. I kind of love that. Let's see if my... No. Sorry, I'm highlighting that because I like it. We all said amen in unison. We all tucked into our food like laborers after a hard day's work, but between mouthfuls the conversation flowed with surprising ease. It was different to see Teacher in our home as our guest. I wondered why we hadn't had her over more often. I figured it was probably one of those grown-up things that seemed to make life complicated. After we finished our soup and Ben devoured the last buttery biscuit, we all pitched in to clear off the dishes. In the kitchen, Mother poured coffee for herself and Teacher. Ben and I filled mugs with milk. Teacher unwrapped the cookies she brought and arranged them on an etched glass plate Mother handed her. When we returned to the dining room, Teacher set the plate in the middle of the table and proclaimed with a flourish, Bon appetit! Ben grabbed 2 large cookies and began to dunk pieces in his milk. I closed my fingers around 2 cookies as well, but before I retracted my hand, I glimpsed at Mother, who nodded her permission. It was a festive night indeed for Mother to allow such sugar consumption. When she snatched 2 cookies for herself and looked in my direction with a grin, I nearly fell out of my chair. Well, I never would have believed this if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. 2 cookies at one time, Teacher remarked. She did know. Your heavenly sweets have tempted me beyond what I could bear, Mother confessed. As we lingered over dessert, Teacher cleared her throat and announced, May I have everyone's attention, please? As you all are aware, our next art appreciation night is next Tuesday. The last one was a resounding success, thanks to the support of art enthusiasts such as yourselves. For our next event, I have asked a small group of artists to combine their work for a mixed media collaboration of local talent. That sounds wonderful, Anne. Who have you asked to participate? Mother asked. So far, I have asked Frist, Mrs. Wilson, and Mrs. Grant. I stopped mid-bite, half a cookie sticking out of my mouth. The only one missing from that list was me. Pearl, I'm wondering if you would be willing to enter the pieces you worked on this summer, Teacher said. That way I can showcase our summer art class as a whole and stir up interest for upcoming classes. What do you say? I finished chewing. I was equal parts flattered and terrified. After I washed down the crumbs with a generous swig of milk, I answered with a question of my own. Will I have to say anything? Only if you want to, Teacher assured me. Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Grant have agreed to say something. Fritz is more reluctant, as you might imagine, but I am hopeful he will say a few words. It's always helpful for an audience to become acquainted with an artist when they view their art. If you want, I can give you a few questions ahead of time so you can prepare your answers. If that's too much, though, I still would love to display your pieces. They are quite good, and it might encourage other young people to join the class next summer. I glanced at Ben, who gave me a shrug. Why not? He said. She's right. You have some good stuff to show off. Display. I punched him on the shoulder. It's not about showing off, I said. It's about bringing enjoyment to people, and maybe helping them see the world in a new way. That's what I think, anyway. He grinned back at me. I'm only teasing. I think you should go for it, and I think you should display your baby sketches. Your baby sketches? Teacher interjected. You have more than the one I saw this summer? I glared at Ben. He grinned as I replied. Yes, Teacher, I have a couple more. May I see them? She asked. If that's okay. I sighed and nodded as I got up to retrieve the drawings. I trusted Teacher, but I knew that showing her the sketches meant more than just looking at them. It meant explaining how they came to be. For some reason, it seemed like an invasion of privacy, a crossing of a line, a baring of the soul. Maybe that was a bit dramatic, but it was how I felt. I grabbed my folder from my dresser and brought it back to the dining room. Mother and Teacher were talking quietly while Ben consumed another large cookie. As I sat down, Mother turned to me, a gentle pleading in her eyes. Sweetheart, Teacher Anne was asking me about the sketch of Joseph you showed her this summer. She is aware that Violet's baby was stillborn, which naturally has left her perplexed as to the origin of your drawing. Could you tell her the story? Okay, I said, but what about Timothy and Siobhan? Ben chimed in. I can tell that story. Well, at least the beginning. I was there for that one. Teacher Anne set her elbows on the table and placed her chin on her crossed fingers. To say I'm intrigued would be putting it mildly. However, I don't want to force you to tell me anything. I respect your right as the artist to divulge or withhold, whatever you think is best. Looking into her sincere eyes, a great pressure lifted off my chest, and I knew it was okay to tell her my story. Beyond that, I knew she needed to hear it, and so, with help from Mother and Ben, the stories behind the sketches spilled out. Also, I love that even in those small moments of knowing whether or not to share her story, she's getting these promptings from the Holy Spirit of, like, this person
is okay to tell the full story, and this person, and it may not always be like a you can never tell them the story, but sometimes it's a maybe not now. Like, even in being vulnerable and sharing things, like, yes, we need to be vulnerable with people, but you don't necessarily want to tell everything to everybody, and sometimes there's a sequence to how God wants you to reveal certain things to people. So it's good, like, that's, as your relationship with the Holy Spirit grows, he's going to help you walk through those moments of, like, what is okay to share now, and who's okay to share it with, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Beyond that, I knew she needed to hear it, and so, with help from Mother and Ben, the stories behind the sketches spilled out. Teacher sat in rapt attention. She seemed to capture each word picture I painted. She didn't check the tears when they came, but let them slide freely down her cheeks. Mother tucked a napkin into her hands. When the last word of the last sentence dropped from my lips, we all sat in hushed silence, the sputter of the candles the only sound in the room. Teacher dabbed her eyes and wiped her nose. At last she said softly, "Thank you, Pearl. That is amazing. I can't tell you how deeply your story has touched me tonight. Thank you." "You're welcome." "May I see them now?" Teacher asked. I slid the folder with my sketches across the table, and Teacher drew it reverently into her care, as though she were receiving the Mona Lisa. Her fingers trembled as she opened the folder. Fresh tears lit her eyes as she spread the sketches out on the table, all 3 in a row. "Oh, Pearl," she whispered, as her hands lighted tentatively on each one. "So much life in their eyes. Oh, my goodness." Ben kicked my foot under the table. "Good job," he mouthed, giving me a thumbs up. I mouthed back, "Thanks." It wasn't time to talk out loud yet. We waited quietly, letting Teacher study the drawings. "Could we possibly display these at the Art Appreciation Night?" she asked, looking up at me. "You don't have to tell the stories behind them, or you can if you want. I just want people to see these beautiful babies. They are captivating. They exude such joie de vivre." I didn't know what to say. "You don't have to give me an answer tonight," she added quickly. "Talk to your mother. You can let me know in a day or two, okay?" "Yeah, okay," I replied. "Fantastic. And thank you again for baring your soul. That takes courage. Your stories are safe with me if you want me to keep them secret." "Would you? At least for now," I said. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with all of this just yet." "I can understand that," she said, nodding her head. "It's quite a treasure trove you've been given. Wisdom is required to handle such a gift. But you have a mother whose middle name is Wisdom, so you should be all right." "Oh, Anne," Mother said as she clasped her friend's hand. "It's been great to have you here. We need to do this again, and sooner rather than later. I'm so pleased you decided to stay north for the winter." Teacher squeezed her hand and replied, "Truth is, I finally realized that the thing I was looking for in Florida was actually right back here all along." "What's that?" Mother prodded. "Don't get me wrong, I love Florida. The colors, the people, the food, the warm weather," she said with a sigh. "And for a season it was a very healing place for me. But there came a day when I felt restless. I couldn't find peace, not even in my art. I traveled back to Paris and spent a few months there, thinking maybe a change of scenery was all I needed. But one day, as I stared at yet another painting in another museum, I realized that what I wanted, and needed, was to go back to my roots and take care of some of the tangled ends I'd left unattended." Mother nodded. Teacher nodded. Quiet ascended once more, and once more I sensed there was more to their story than what I knew. Teacher interrupted my ponderings. She slid the sketches carefully back into the folder and turned to Ben. "Well, Mr. Bradley, it's probably high time you got home. Can I give you a ride, neighbor?" "That's awfully nice, but I have my bike here, and I may need it in the morning, if it hasn't snowed a foot by then," Ben said. "Oh, that's not a problem," she said with a wave of her hand. "I drove the Blazer tonight. We should be able to stuff the bike in the back end." "Are you still driving that old thing?" Mother asked. "Yeah, I can't seem to let it go, and it just felt right to drive it over here tonight, if you know what I mean." Teacher's voice tapered off. Mother stepped forward to give her a hug. I heard her whisper, "I do know what you mean, Anne. I do." Teacher whispered something into Mother's ear. Mother shook her head and whispered something back before they pulled back to arm's length. They looked at each other with tearful smiles for a moment. "Pearl, please get Teacher Anne's coat," Mother instructed. I moved to comply, but I had questions. I definitely had some questions.
Love that. Okay.
I gotta start drinking water in between chapters. Okay, I'm thinking maybe 1 or 2 more chapters. Okay, I'm on chapter 19. Grown-up stuff. When the candles were extinguished, the placemats put away, the dishes done, and the leftovers stashed in the fridge, Mother and I trekked down the hallway to get ready for bed. I ducked into the bathroom first and performed the usual nightly rituals. When I finished, I slid across the hall to my bedroom and hollered, "It's all yours," before I closed my door. A chill seeped through the purple shag carpet in my room. I dropped to my knees next to my bottom dresser drawer and searched in earnest for my flannel nightgown. Once located, I undressed in haste, tossed my clothes into a heap, and quickly slipped the soft nightie over my head. I leapt into my bed and burrowed under the covers, sticking my nose out for a breath of fresh air. When I peeped out above the blankets, I realized the overhead light was still on. "Mother!" I shouted through the door. "Just a minute," came the muffled reply. True to her word, in just a minute she popped through my door, garbed from neck to toes in her flannel nightie as well. "Yes? Something you need?" "Forgot to turn off my light." "Too nippy to venture out again?" she said, flipping off the switch. She remained in the doorway, silhouetted by the bathroom light. "You did a good thing tonight. I realize it's not easy for you, but your story is powerful. It brings comfort to people. We need to pray and see how God wants you to handle it." "Yeah, okay." She blew me a kiss and turned back to the bathroom, but before she could escape, I blurted out, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" She slid back into view. "Of course, what's up?" I wasn't sure what to ask, but I knew I had to get some answers, or I would fall asleep with speculation spinning in my head. I ran through several possible approaches. "Pearl, you wanted to ask me something?" "Yeah, I was just wondering, well, why hasn't Teacher Anne been to our house before? You seem like good friends, but you don't hang out very often. More like not at all." Mother's head drooped slightly. She pushed the door all the way open and shuffled across the carpet in her hand-knit slippers. "Well, funny you should ask," she started. "Scoot over and let me sit down if you truly want to hear the story." "I truly do," I replied, as I shifted to make room. Mother flipped the bedside lamp to switch on. Oh my gosh, okay, sorry. I got distracted by I'm getting very easily distracted today. I was distracted by because I wanted to make sure that the audio was good, since I'm leaning forward. Okay. Mother flipped the bedside lamp to switch to on and went to turn the bathroom light off. She was not a fan of leaving lights on unnecessarily. Returning to my room, she kicked off her slippers and crawled under the covers. She grabbed a big stuffed bear from the end of my bed and plumped it up to use as a backrest. "There," she said, "2 peas in a pod." I smiled up at her from my strawberry shortcake pillowcase and waited for her to begin. "Where to start?" she sighed. "First of all, Teacher Anne has given me permission to tell you this, and I think you're old enough to hear the story, okay?" I nodded solemnly. She settled back into the bear and crossed her hands in her lap. "So, Anne and I first became friends because your father and her husband Rick worked at the mill together. Actually, those 2 guys were high school classmates, played on the baseball team together, went to the same church, and lived on the same block. Since your daddy was an only child, Rick was the brother he never had." Her eyes grew distant. I lay perfectly still and waited for her to resume. "Anne grew up just east of here, in a town even smaller than ours," she said. "She met Rick and her father one summer after high school when she played against their team in a co-ed softball tournament. One thing led to another, and she and Rick started dating. They got married later that same fall. I came into the picture a few years later when I married your father, my college sweetheart. Your daddy had been gone for years getting his engineering degree. After graduation, he had had a hard time finding a job. We were already married, and I was pregnant with Susan, so he decided to take a job back here at the paper mill. It wasn't exactly what he wanted to do, but it gave him a way to care for his family. Anyway, an extra perk for your daddy was reconnecting with his high school buddies, especially Rick. Anne and I became friends because those 2 guys were friends. We spent a lot of time together at softball tournaments, barbecues, and church picnics. Rick and Anne were our best friends. In fact, when Susan was born, we asked them to be her godparents. Bet you didn't know that." She glanced at me. I shook my head. "Did Teacher Anne ever have any kids?" I asked. "What happened to Rick? I never knew she had a husband." "Let's take one thing at a time," Mother resumed. "Anne and Rick tried for years to have children, but couldn't. Then, when I got pregnant with David, Anne unexpectedly was expecting too. She and Rick were over the moon, and we were happy for them. Everything seemed perfect, until one day, in her 3rd trimester, she had a miscarriage. They were devastated. We all were. But Anne took it especially hard. No matter how Rick or anyone else tried to encourage her, she slid deeper and deeper into depression. She never left the house, didn't answer the phone, stayed in bed all day, pretty much stopped functioning." Mother stared into the shadows in the hallway and sighed. I felt so helpless, and although I tried to comprehend her grief, it wasn't until a few years later, when I miscarried a baby too, that I truly understood what she was going through. I gulped. "You lost a baby?" She nodded. 2 years after David." Oh my gosh. "I was only about 12 weeks along. In fact, I had just gotten the test results back, confirming my suspicions, when suddenly it was over. I hadn't even told your dad I was pregnant yet, so I just kept the miscarriage to myself." "Why?" I asked. "I don't know exactly. Didn't want to burden him, I guess." She picked idly at lint balls stuck on my comforter. I did confide in Grandma, who of course reminded me that it wasn't an uncommon occurrence, just something women had to endure. "Another sibling?" I was flabbergasted. "Were you sad?" Mother nodded. "Very. Didn't Daddy wonder?" "He did ask me what was going on, but I just told him it was female problems, and he stopped asking," she answered. "Maybe I should have. I don't know. But what's done is done." The minute marker on my clock flipped. Outside my window, empty branches rustled in the wind. "Do you know if it was a boy or a girl?" I said. She shook her head. "No, guess it's one of those things I'll find out when I get to the pearly gates." I nodded, fully assured that this was indeed the case. "But let's go back to Rick and Anne," she said, brushing my bangs back and peering into my eyes as if to check one more time that I was ready for this. I guess she was satisfied with what she saw, because the story continued. 5 or 6 months after Anne lost her baby, Rick decided she needed more help than what he could give. So he enrolled her in a recovery program at a Catholic rehabilitation center a few hours away. Not only did she receive superb help at that center, but it was there that she discovered her love of art. The nuns used art as a form of therapy. It was exactly what Anne needed. She found that art gave her a reason to get out of bed in the morning. She also discovered that her artwork brought joy to others at the center. This new sense of purpose lifted her slowly but steadily out of her depression. When she came home, Rick built an art studio right on her property. She became so accomplished, she started to sell her work at fairs and craft shows all over the state. Eventually, her pieces were displayed in galleries down in the cities and at some of the nicest resorts and restaurants. It was wonderful to see her happy. She and Rick still came over for dinner after church on Sundays or for birthday parties and such, but Anne had a hard time being around the kids. She never did get pregnant again, and for some reason they decided against adoption. I think her art became her baby, her way to bring life into the world. Rick didn't argue. He was just thrilled to have his wife back. Mother went silent. Wow, that's sad, I said. But it's cool that art helped her get better. I like that. I could see that this was stirring up difficult memories for Mother, but I wanted to know the rest. So what happened to Rick? I prompted. She let out a deep sigh and squared her shoulders as if to fortify herself for the rest of the journey down memory lane. I swallowed and tugged the blankets closer to my chin. Maybe I didn't really want to hear anymore. Maybe this wasn't the greatest idea. But maybe knowing hard things was part of growing up. And I did want to grow up. Just not right then. But it was too late. Mother hurtled ahead. Love that. Your daddy and Rick worked on the same crew at the mill as drivers and mechanics. They often worked the same shifts. Whenever that happened, they carpooled in the very same Blazer Teacher Anne drove here tonight. She glanced at me. When she continued, a slight quiver entered her voice. The night of your daddy's accident, Rick was supposed to pick him up, but the Blazer wouldn't start for some reason, so your daddy went by himself. The weather was bad. Icy snow had been falling all day. I was relieved your father wasn't scheduled to drive a route that night. He was supposed to be on mechanic duty, but he volunteered to drive Rick's route, and that's the night it happened, on a route that wasn't even his. Mother brushed away a tear from each eye. I'm sorry for making you cry, I said, blinking away my own tears. No, sweetheart, it's okay. It's time you knew. It's just never easy remembering it all. She reached over and tapped the tip of my nose. Your daddy adored you. I wish you would have had the chance to know him better. Do you remember what he used to call you? Kinda. I remember 'cause sometimes David still calls me that. Pearly Q. Yep, Pearly Q. With the curly Q he used to say when I called your hair into a curly spout on the top. Oh, you thought that was hilarious, so he would say it over and over just to make you giggle. A sad sort of smile crept across her face. He could be very funny at times. I wish I remembered him more. Me too, she sighed, and our mutual longing ground us to a halt for a long moment. So what happened next? I broke the silence, spurred on by curiosity mixed with a growing sense of dread. Something must have happened to Rick. Mother laid her head back on top of the stuffed bear. She stared at the ceiling before she resumed. It's unfortunate. So senseless. She looked back down and twirled the braided edge of my floral comforter as though she was seeking the right thread to pull. Rick was so grief-stricken and full of guilt when your daddy died, she said softly. He couldn't go back to work. He believed it should have been him in the truck that night, and nothing anyone said could make him think differently. He started to drink. A lot. Anne tried to get him to go to the rehabilitation center that helped her so much, but he refused. Then one day, out of the blue, he changed his mind. Said he would go as long as he could drive there himself. She was so desperate for him to get help, she agreed. Of course, she checked to be sure he was sober, and she let him drive off. Mother slid down the stuffed bear until her face was just above mine. Her voice went down to a near whisper as she resumed. Several hours later, she called the center to make sure he had arrived. He hadn't. She checked every hour until late into the night. Then she called the sheriff's department. They said they couldn't file a missing persons report until he had been gone for 24 hours. She climbed into her Volkswagen Bug and went looking for him herself. She searched all night long, but didn't find him. In the morning, she drove directly to the sheriff's office. She filed her report. They sent out a search party. Later that day, they found him. He had driven clear to the Round Lake. That's where he and your daddy used to fish. He'd parked the Blazer and was sitting outside in a snowbank with his back up against a tree, several empty whiskey bottles around him. He must have been there all night in the bitter cold. Drank himself into a stupor, passed out, and well, he froze to death. The last sentence was barely audible. It was as if she wanted me to have the information, but she didn't. She cleared her throat and pressed on, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. After Rick's funeral, Anne locked up her house and went to Paris. Stayed there for months. I was glad she could afford to do that. Knew she'd always wanted to go, and selfishly it was sort of a relief to not run into her all the time. Seeing each other was too full of grief and memories, of things that might have been or should have been. When she came back to the States, Anne got a place in Florida for half the year and poured herself into her artwork. I poured myself into you kids and my work, and our lives just went separate ways. We'd see each other around town from time to time whenever she was back from Florida, but our attempts at conversation were awkward and brief. When I found out she was teaching an art class this summer, I had an inkling you might be interested in going, so I signed you up. Of course, I was excited for you to have a chance to learn from Anne, but I also hoped it might give us a chance to reconnect. I never imagined how important it would be for all of us. She turned to me, her face soft and thoughtful. From the first class, you couldn't stop talking about Teacher Anne, how talented she is, how kind, how funny, how caring. When I saw her through your eyes... When I saw her through your eyes, I remembered all the things I loved about her. Oh, I love that. And I found myself longing to renew our friendship. That's why I invited her here tonight. I wanted to see if we could maybe build a bridge over all the hard times and reconnect. I think that tonight we started that process. Oh, gosh. Ugh. My heart was a jumble of emotions. Life was strange. How could it be so terrible and so beautiful? Mother? Yes? Will you stay with me, at least for a little while? She leaned over and kissed me on the forehead before switching off my lamp. As she nestled down under the covers, I snuggled up to her back. She whispered into the darkness, "This is going to be cozy." In the dream, the sun was high in the sky. I sat on the front porch waiting for someone. No one came. Still, I waited and waited. Shadows from the trees lengthened. A sharp breeze penetrated my cotton blouse, raised goosebumps on my arms. At last, I gave up my vigil and stood to go inside. But just as I did, someone yelled from far away, "Pearl, wait up!" I peered down the street in the dusky light. A person on a bicycle headed my way. It was Ben. He wore a large backpack like one a hiker might take on an expedition into the Himalayas. "Ben, I've been waiting for you all day," I exclaimed as he approached. "I expected you hours ago. Now it's too late." He pulled in next to the porch and sat on his bike, perfectly balanced, without pedaling or touching the ground. "Yeah, sorry. I kind of got lost," he said. "There was a detour. I had to go way out to the highway and back around behind the school. But I'm here now. Please don't say it's too late. Evening is sometimes the best part of the day to hang out," he pleaded, as his dimpled grin spread from ear to ear. My heart softened. "Well, okay, you can stay. But what's in your backpack? Are you going somewhere? Or are you moving in?" "Yeah," he said. "Open it up." I didn't quite understand his response, but I stretched my hand out to the backpack anyway. "But I can't reach it. You're too far away." "Okay, I'll pull up right next to the porch." He came up close, his back to me. When I unhooked the backpack's top flap, a small baby head popped through the opening and grinned at me with a familiar grin. "Well, hello, little guy," I said with a laugh. "What's your name?" Ben glanced over his shoulder. "Oh, that's Daniel. Isn't he something?" "Yes, he sure is. Not what I expected to find, but he's a cutie. Reminds me of you, except his eyes are much darker and his hair is super curly. That's because he looks like my dad." "Oh, this is your brother?" "Yeah, of course," Ben said. "Who else do you think I'd be carrying around?" Daniel started to squiggle, trying to escape from the backpack. "Oh my gosh." I reached over to stop him. That's when I noticed other eyes peering out from the bottom of the sack. Ben, are you aware that there are several more babies in your backpack right underneath Daniel?" "What? No, I don't know nothing about them." "Well, it can't be good for them to be sitting down there in the dark." "Oh, don't worry, Pearl. Everything will work out. I just wanted to stop by so you could see that Daniel and I are good." "You're good?" "Yeah, we're good. Aren't we, Dan?" Ben lifted a hand and Daniel slapped him a high five. "See, we're good. Thought you should know before I go." "Before you go? Are you leaving? I thought we were going to hang out." A hollow spot opened in my chest. Ben gazed at me with a gaze full of sadness, hope, pain, and love. Suddenly, he seemed old and worn out. I wanted to comfort him, but he began to pedal away. Far, far away, and he didn't look back. "Ben, wait! Ben, don't go!" I cried out. "Come back! Ben! Ben!" I woke to Mother softly shaking my shoulder. "Pearl, wake up. It's just a dream. Wake up." I blinked as Mother turned on the lamp. "Are you okay?" she asked, struggling to sit up and untangle my limbs from hers. I was disoriented. For a moment I couldn't figure out why I felt so disturbed. Then I remembered the image of Ben pedaling away. I looked at Mother with a strangled voice whispered, "He's leaving. Ben is leaving, and he's going far, far away." I began to cry in deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I knew it was for more than just Ben. It was for Daddy, Rick, and Teacher Anne, for babies lost, siblings unknown, friendships interrupted, and the hard things in life. I couldn't fathom how grown-ups lived with all this knowing. Mother drew my head onto her lap. I wrapped my arms around her waist and clung to her like a buoy in a windswept bay. She stroked my head and quietly began to sing in her soothing alto voice. "Children of the Heavenly Father, safely in his bosom gather. Nestling bird, not star, nor star in heaven, such a refuge e'er was given. God his own doth tend and nourish, in his holy courts they flourish. From all evil things he spares them, in his mighty arms he bears them. Neither life nor death shall ever from the Lord his children sever. Unto them his grace he showeth, and their sorrows all he knoweth." As each stanza of the familiar hymn washed over me, my sobs subsided. An inexplicable peace began to heal the bottomless despair in my heart. Mother handed me a tissue from the nightstand. She continued her calming lullaby, reminding me that I was still her baby, no matter how far I had traveled down the road to maturity in one night. Though he giveth or he taketh, God his children ne'er forsaketh. His the loving purpose solely, to preserve them pure and holy. Praise the Lord in joyful numbers, your protector never slumbers. At the will of your defender, every foeman must surrender. I lay exhausted but contented as she continued to hum and stroke my hair. Mother, I whispered hoarsely. Yes, dear. Could you sing it again? She could, and she did. Wow. Oof. Okay, that was the end of... I want to look up this. I'm looking up the hymn, because I don't think I've ever heard that one before. Okay, let me see how long this chapter is. Because I actually do... Okay, I'm going to read one more chapter. I was going to say, I do have a feeling that she is going to start, whether it's in dreams or visions or whatever, I do think that she's going to start seeing more babies. Like that dream, she saw Ben's brother, and she's going to be able to draw them from those dreams and then help people process through things. So, okay, next chapter 20. This is going to be my last chapter of the day because I've already been reading for an hour and a half, but still one more chapter. Okay, chapter 20, Dreamscape. Mother vacated my bedroom in the wee hours of the morning. I felt her leave, but didn't protest. My need for her touchable presence had diminished, and the reality was that it was difficult for two people to sleep in my bed. At 7 a.m., I peeked at my alarm clock, anticipating the usual 7:15 a.m. beeps. 15 more minutes. My head ached, and my eyes were puffy. I longed for much more than 15 minutes. Then a cheery thought bubbled to the surface. It was Saturday. In nothing flat, I was sound asleep, cold-clocked by bliss. Pearl, it's 10 o'clock. Mother's voice penetrated my slumber. You might want to get up and get dressed. Ben is at the front door with sleds in hand looking for a sliding partner, and Mel just called a few minutes ago. Sliding? In my groggy state, I couldn't make sense of her announcement. She walked across the room and pulled up the shades. First snow of the winter, she proclaimed. I stumbled out of bed with my stuffed kitty in hand to join her at the window. Holy moly! I peered out the backyard. It had been transformed into a puffy winter dreamscape. I blinked rapidly at the excessive whiteness. It started right after midnight, and it's still coming down, Mother reported. They say we'll have 10 to 12 inches more before it's all over sometime tonight. Yippee! I threw my stuffed animal into the air and caught her by one paw as I spun around in celebration. All the night's sorrows evaporated and joy erupted. I dropped to my knees and pulled out a drawer under my bed filed with my winter gear, wool socks, long johns, snow pants, scarves, stocking caps, mittens, etc. Mother smiled at my enthusiasm. I take it you want me to ask Ben to wait? Yes, please, I mumbled as I pulled my nightie over my head and prepared to dress for the adventure. The metamorphosis from sleepyhead to snow bunny took less than 10 minutes. When I opened the front door, Ben was stacking a good-sized snowball on top of a larger one. The two of them combined reached up to Ben's chin. Hey, need some help? I asked. Sure, still need a head, he said. I know, but what about the snowman? Ha ha, very funny. That's so cute! Oh my gosh. I love that. I shuffled through the snow on the steps and knelt on the ground, ready for action. I packed a small snowball and rolled it in the flakes. It was perfect snowman making snow, sticky but not too wet. Quickly, it grew into the proportions of a proper head. I handed it to Ben for placement and then scrounged 2 dead branches off the shrub by the porch, which I stuck on each side of the middle snowball for arms. Ben brushed aside the snow from along the sidewalk and gathered enough pebbles for us to fashion a face for markeration. He embedded the eyes and the nose while I worked on the mouth. We stepped back to inspect our work. That is one fine-looking snowman, don't you think? Ben asked, his hands on his hips, admiring our handiwork. Oh, the finest, I agreed. What shall we name him? Frank, he said without hesitation. Of course, I laughed. Frank it is. Satisfied that our work was done, we walked over to the porch and grabbed the ropes of the sleds Ben had laid there and began our trek to the sliding hill. See you later, Frank, Ben hollered over his shoulder as we left. Don't let Frosty talk you into any crazy side trips. Maybe we'll build you a girlfriend when we get back, I added. Ben rolled his eyes. Girls. You always gotta add romance to the deal. I giggled. We slogged through the muffled streets, kicking up snow geysers and catching flakes on our tongues. The troublesome revelations of the previous night were smothered by blankets of pure white. There was no question as to where we were headed. The biggest and best sliding hill in town was behind the high school. Of course, we weren't the only ones with sliding on our minds. It seemed half the town was there by the time we arrived. Pearl! A voice cried out. Ben! Came a second wild shout. Mel and Elle zipped past us on a toboggan. Ben and I laughed as they careened out of control. The rear end whipped past the front end as they sailed down the hill backward, screaming all the way to the bottom. We climbed to the crest of the hill. Race ya, Ben challenged, taking a seat on his sled. I ran 3 steps and flew onto my sled. Catch me if you can, I whooped as I shot past him. No fair, he yelled, struggling to get started. Go, Pearl, go, Elle hollered from the sidelines as I zoomed by. Covered from head to toe in snow, it was hard to tell where Elle stopped and the hillside started. The wild red hair protruding from her stocking cap was the only telltale sign that it was her. I waved triumphantly to her, sure of my impending victory. At the apex of my glory, a dip in the course caught the lip of my sled and catapulted me into the air. I landed on my bottom 10 feet down the hill, discombobulated by the sudden flight. Ben sped by with an exultant grin, my unmanned sled skittering to the bottom behind him. The most serious injury I sustained was to my pride. Ben rubbed it in for a while until he too landed flat on his face in a massive wipeout, with Mel on the toboggan behind him. The hill humbled us all, and we loved it. The hours zipped by as we flew down the hill and trudged back up again and again. By the time Mel checked her watch, it was after 2 o'clock. Oh my gosh, she said. I gotta get home. My mom volunteered me to babysit the neighbor twins. Their mom is at work and their dad needs to fix his snowblower. Elle, you coming with me? Elle mopped her nose with her snow-encrusted mitten. The prospect of being housebound with you and those 2 whirling dervishes for hours on end is not at all appealing. Aw, come on, Mel pleaded. Be a pal. I'll split the pay with ya. Dear, dear Mel, Elle sighed. I have no need of your petty bribes. I will join you out of the sheer goodness of my heart. And out of the hope of getting a glimpse of the other neighbor, Mark Bukowski, I teased. It is so hard to believe that I might have Is it so hard to believe that I might have purely altruistic motives? Elle said. Yes, it is, Mel replied. Whatever altruistic means, let's go. She backed away, making sure Elle followed. Elle gave me a quick hug. If you've not heard from us by noon tomorrow, we may have been consumed by cannibalistic 2-year-olds. She tramped behind Mel dramatically, as if being led to the stake. They can't be that bad, Ben said. Well, maybe not cannibalistic for real, I commented, but they do have a reputation for biting. Yeah, that's rough. Maybe you wonder if that snowblower is really broken or if the guy just needs a break. Ben, I punched his shoulder, which had little to no impact through all the layers of puffy down. Having stood in one place for a while, I realized my toes were aching from the cold and my neck felt raw from the clumps of snow deposited there in my last wipeout. Hey, I'm getting pretty cold, I said. How about you? Nah, but I'm starting to starve, Ben admitted. Let's take one more run and then head home. It was one run too many. Waiting for us at the bottom of the hill were Reggie Dumfrey and a couple of his hoodlums. Well, 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 if it ain't Romeo and Peculiar, Reggie said. It must just be me, fellas, but I think these 2 have been avoiding us. His buddies laughed. What's the matter, Romeo? Scared to finish what you started in the hallway? Reggie sneered. Ben's eyes began to blaze. Ben, let's go back to my house. He's just trying to get your goat. I pulled on his sleeve and started back up the hill. Yeah, he ain't worth it, he agreed, and began to follow my ascent. But Reggie wasn't done. Ooh, going back to Peculiar's house. I'll bet all kinds of weird stuff happens there at the gypsy witch doctor's place. I spun around. What are you even talking about, you ignorant brute? Hey, Pearl, remember what you told me? Ben tried to smooth my ruffled feathers. My ma says your ma's some sort of wacko hippie baby doctor. Reggie contorted his face and pretended to smoke a joint. His pal slapped his back. Good one, Reg, they said, passing around the imaginary joint. Guess you and Elfspit make quite a team. Reggie was on a roll. Her dad goes around the county making babies, and your ma crashes and... Oh my gosh, I can't read today. Jeez. Her dad goes around the county making babies, and your ma cashes in delivering them. I would have charged down the hill and taken his head off if Ben hadn't restrained me. Easy now, Pearl, he whispered in my ear. Heard the last one didn't go so well, though. Reggie turned to his gang. Probably made old man Furnace happy he wouldn't have to raise someone else's brat. The alarmed expressions on the hoodlums' faces came too late to save Reggie. The human projectile named Ben Bradley flew down the hill and into his back. Ben stuffed Reggie's face into the snow and held it there until Reggie's flailing arms and kicking feet began to still. The surprise attack left the Dumfrey crew so dumbfounded I was the one who had to pull Ben off Reggie's back. Hey, Ben, that's enough. Ben pulled Reggie's head up by the hair and hissed into his ear. Don't ever say stuff like that again. You got it? Reggie tried to nod. Ben let go, and Reggie rolled onto his back, gasping for air. His buddies looked at one another, turned tail, and ran. Let's get out of here, I said. I pulled Ben up and grabbed our sleds. He stared at Reggie as we backed up the hill, just to make sure he stayed down. We tramped wordlessly back to the house through the mounting snowdrifts. Thanks, I said at last. Welcome. The rest of our journey was as silent as the falling snow as I thought about what happened. Was what Reggie said true? Did Elle know? Maybe it was just small-town gossip. Not having a mother who participated in the village grapevine, I wasn't privy as to how one verified what was true or not. It wasn't always crazy to me how so many people knew so many things about so many others, or at least they thought they did. But how did you know if what they thought they knew was factual? I wondered how long it would take before word of Ben's takedown of Reggie would hit the grapevine. A smile snuck up on me, despite the seriousness of what had just transpired. Ben had been magnificent. My mind was so busy it wasn't until we had shed our wet snow gear and were sitting at the kitchen table eating tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches that I remembered my dream from the night before. As the images scrolled through my memory, a familiar despair gnawed at my heart. "Hey, you," I heard vaguely as a crumpled paper napkin plopped into my soup. "Ben," I exclaimed as I scooped out the mushy clump from my bowl. "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to get your attention," he said with a shrug. "You were totally zoned out. What's up with you?" "Sorry, I was, remembering something." "Like what? The creation of the universe? Because you looked like you were way out in space." "No, it wasn't anything like that. It was sort of personal." "Ooh, personal girl stuff," he said, putting his hands up in self-defense. "Not sure I want to know." "Ben, I'm serious." "Well then, what is it? Are you going to tell me or not?" I didn't want to cry in front of him, but I figured he'd cried in front of me. "I had a dream about you," I said quietly. "That's it? Lots of girls tell me that." I picked up the lump of wet napkin and threw it back at him. He ducked, and the gooey mess hit the fridge and seeped down to the floor. I didn't even care. "Bren Bradley, you are a brat. That is not what I meant, and you know it." He threw both hands in the air, his head dipped to the side to avoid any further airborne projectiles. "Hey, hey, hey, I'm only teasing. Can't a guy tease anymore? Not when I just told you it was personal." He peered timidly at me. "Maybe I'm not sure I want to hear your dream," he confessed. "You make it sound ominous." "It's not ominous," I contended. "It's mostly good. And then kinda not." "Great," he said, scooching his bowl aside to make room for his crossed arms on the table. "I guess I'd better hear it, the good, the bad, and the sad." I started from the beginning. I told him how I had waited for him for hours because he'd gotten lost, and that I had told him when he finally did show up that he was too late. "And that's when you said, 'I'm not late. Evening is sometimes the best part of the day to hang out.'" "Hey, that's a pretty good line," Bed said, complimenting his dream image. "True, but may I remind you that since it was a dream, I am actually the one who came up with it?" "I guess," he conceded, and I continued. As I described the large backpack he carried and told him what happened when I unhooked the top flap, he moaned. "A baby? It's always babies with you. Why would I carry around a baby?" "Actually, you had more than one baby in the backpack. There were a couple more down near the bottom. You said you didn't know anything about them, but the one that popped up, well, you knew him. You told me his name was Daniel and that he was your brother." All the color drained from Ben's face. "Daniel? Did I tell you his name was Daniel?" "In the dream you did." "I know, but before that, did you know his name was Daniel before the dream?" I shook my head. "Is his name Daniel?" "Yeah, Daniel James." He spoke as if he was trying to fathom the unfathomable. "What did he look like?" "Well, he looked kind of like you, but not really, only when he smiled. Then he had the same dimples as you, but his eyes were much darker than yours, and his hair was curly. You told me it was because he looked like your dad." Ben dropped his head into his hands. "This is weird, really weird." After several long moments, he looked up and said, "I need to show you something." He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out an old leather wallet. He undid the snap that held it closed and laid it flat on the table. There wasn't a lot in it that I could see, a couple pictures in their plastic flaps and a dollar bill peeking out. Ben pitched the wallet to reveal a hidden slot under the photographs. He slid one finger all the way into the slot and pulled out a newspaper clipping preserved in a cellophane slipcover. The cellophane crinkled as he carefully removed the newspaper clipping. It was about 2 inches wide and 3 inches long. He paused to study it himself, then handed it across the table to me. "My mom's cousin sent this to us," he explained. "She cut it out of the newspaper. It's the obituary for my brother. For Daniel. That's him at the top." I stared at the picture. "This is the baby I saw." I gulped and read through the brief description of a brief life, then reverently set the clipping back on the table. "Ben, there was more. In the dream you said the reason you came to my house was to tell me that you and Daniel were good. You were happy to have him on your back, and he was happy to be there. He even slapped you a high five." Ben sat motionless for a minute before asking, "Was he really happy?" I nodded. "He was, and so were you." "That's cool." He reached across the table to retrieve the clipping. With infinite care, he placed it back into the wallet and returned the wallet to his pocket. "So, there must be more," he said, "'cause I think what you just told me is the good part, right?" "Yeah, that was the good part." I took a sip from my glass of water, willing myself to not get teary-eyed as I told him the last part of my dream, but as soon as I opened my mouth, my eyes blurred. "The sad part is, you left, and you didn't turn around when I yelled after you. You kept pedaling and pedaling until you were far away, and I knew you weren't coming back." I looked down into my bowl of half-eaten soup, unable to meet Ben's gaze. "Hey, it was just a dream," he asserted. "I mean, maybe parts of it are more real than other parts. Maybe." I knew he was trying to console me, but it wasn't working. I glanced at him, embarrassed by my tears. The ring of the telephone interrupted our awkward moment. I couldn't seem to move to answer it. It rang again and again until Mother scurried into the room and grabbed the receiver on the fly. As she answered, she looked at me with a face that conveyed the question, "Is there something you couldn't have picked up the phone? Or is there some reason you couldn't have picked up the phone?" Her voice was calm, though, and her conversation short. She hung up and turned back to us. "Ben, that was your mom. She wants you to head home." She paused to assess our quiet scene. "Are you two okay?" Ben came to my rescue, again. We're fine, just a little tired from all the fresh air. Okay, Mother said. Her raised left eyebrow told me she wasn't buying that explanation. Nevertheless, she left the room, and I helped Ben get geared back up for the walk home. Thanks for, well, for everything, he said, as he opened the door to leave. You too. The wind blew in a skiff of snow as Ben went out. I stood there and watched him plow through the drifts on the steps, unconcerned about the flakes collecting at my feet. He grabbed the ropes to the sleds and began to pull them to the driveway. He stopped to brush a layer of excess snow off Frank's grinning face as he passed by. After a few steps, he turned back. See you soon, Pearl. I waved and shut the door. Of course I would see him soon. Why wouldn't I? Oh, no. Oh, I'm afraid. Okay, let me see. Give me 1 second. I might read one more chapter. Okay, let me see how long this chapter is, and then I might read another one. Oh, it's kind of long, but I want to keep going. Okay, I feel like that's a good place to stop, so I'm going to stop there. Stopping at chapter 21. It's so good. I hate that I say this every time, but if I can find time to stream again, I'll try to. But if not, I'll see you guys next Monday. Yeah, honestly, today is just a chill day, and I feel like I don't have quite as much to say today, so that's it. But if you guys want to connect with me, you can follow me on Instagram. You can subscribe to my Substack. Obviously, follow me on Twitch here if you'd like. And yeah, let me know if you guys want to see anything else. But I'll see you guys next Monday for my next installment of the Baby Catcher Gate. Love you guys. Hope you have a great week.